Hey y'all, I'm Kiara Butler, and welcome to Generation Rising, where we discuss hard hitting topics that our diverse communities face every day. And today's topic is a sensitive one. We're talking about the missing and murdered Indigenous women movement. And I'd like to welcome Vincent Schilling, author, journalist, and founder of Native Viewpoint. Hi, Vincent. How are
Hi,
you?
thanks so much for having me. Appreciate it.
Yes, and we're actually talking to you through Zoom. How is that feeling for you?
Feels great. I'm used to it. I live on Zoom. Especially ever since the pandemic, we've just been a world of Zoom and social media, and kind of talking to each other virtually. So it's certainly something I'm used to say the least.
Yeah, so I'm happy to have you here talking to us about this topic today. It's not oftentimes something that we talk about. And
Mm.
so why is there a widespread silence on the issue? Why do you think that is?
Well, first of all, it's uncomfortable. The reality of many things sometimes people don't want to talk about. We want to sweep things under the rug. We don't want to look at what's really going on. But what a lot of people don't realize is that in the United States and Canada, First Nations Canada, Native American women are more than twice as likely to experience violence than any other demographic. And, very sad to say, is the statistics say 1 in 3 Indigenous women is sexually assaulted during her life. And 67% or even up to 70 of these assaults are perpetrated by non-Indigenous perpetrators. But I can tell you in my circles as a Native American journalist, someone who's interviewed a lot of people, um, in the Indigenous community, I can say I do not know of a Native woman who hasn't been a victim of assault or violence in my career, and I've been doing this almost 20 years. You look at the what's known as the Highway of Tears in Canada, where 19 women have been killed on the Highway of Tears, and the serial killer Robert Pickton. Some of the there were about 49 women from the Vancouver area murdered by this guy. So the statistics are disturbing and telling. It's very sad.
Yeah, and to have all of this research and these numbers, how is that possible?
Well, for longest time it hasn't been possible, and trying to find actual numbers or current statistics. The latest statistic, from Canada is 5,700, missing and murdered Indigenous women, but that's from a 2016 report. That is 6 years ago, and to find current statistics a lot of times is a struggle. Especially as a journalist. I have to dig quite a bit to find what happened most recently, and I'm resigned a lot of the times to cite old census statistics or old statistics from even a decade ago as the most current statistics on things that happened. It's troubling.
So, would you say that our judicial systems are set up to help or protect Native communities?
No, 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 not at all. I mean, don't get me wrong. There are people in the law enforcement communities who do care, and there are lawmakers and legislators who do care. I met with former Senator Heidi Heitkamp in Washington D.C., who championed um, the Savannah's Act and Not Invisible Act in order to create government resources for tribal communities or tribal officers or those looking to find these cases of Indigenous missing and murdered women. But that's not enough. I mean, if you look at the court case from 1978, and a lot of people haven't heard this, but you can even look it up. It's called Oliphant versus the Suquamish Indian tribe, in which a man was arrested on tribal territories. And it's a Supreme Court case that decided that Indian courts have no criminal jurisdiction over non Indians. So you ask, well, wait, so native nations are supposed to be sovereign nations,
Mm-hmm.
so why can't we have our own courts? But the Supreme Court ruled that, well, it's not considered a group of your peers, so you can't vote on or have a jury against someone who commits a crime on your land. So this opened it up for anyone. Hey, I could just go to a reservation land and commit a crime and not be busted for it. I'm in. So thankfully, the Violence Against Women Acts, you know, reinstitution has stifled that in somewhat, and it's changed some things. But this jurisdiction, or this lack of jurisdiction on Indian nations, is really very troubling.
Yeah, it is. And I'm really trying to grapple with right now how the data is from like 2016, or that you're
Yeah.
citing a case from 1978. I was born in
Mm.
1990, so it's like, why are we still using data that is that old when we're having this topic?
Because people don't want to cover it. People don't want to look into it. That cause a lot of work. And when we do work, or when we get grants, or when we do things, or we do research, it's about what is most interesting to the public, and the public doesn't want to know about these things. It's just a sad truth to the existence of or non-existence of statistics for Native American and First Nations people. It's something I struggle with, have been struggling with for decades as a journalist. I'm always like, well, where's the statistics? And I have to do my own research. I have to find my own stuff. And it's not easy.
Yeah, so maybe can you tell us more about the red hand? Like, what does that paint represent, and how does it tie into the Native culture?
Yeah, sure. Well, it's when we say Native culture, and that's a good question. Thank you for asking. When we say Native culture, uh, we have to keep in mind there's over 572 or 574 federally recognized tribes in the United States, and that number is continuing to increase. And that's not including the state recognized tribes. That's also not including the completely unwritten history of Black Indians, which were, uh, or in my opinion, some of the biggest unwritten history in the United States. So you take about all these cultures and all these Native cultures, and myself as a Mohawk, I can't speak for every Native person. You know what I'm saying? I can speak for myself, or share stories of people who I've spoken with. But the red hand in many tribes, red paint usually signifies having been in battle, or battle-oriented paint, or a successful battle. Or some tribes, tribal members, if they wear red feathers, it shows they've been wounded in battle. Or it does show, it can show a killing. In this particular case, the red handprint, I look at it as, and I know someone would agree with me, and some would look at it in different ways, is the red hand, in my view, represents someone who has killed an Indigenous woman. And to place that hand, to think of, there's a bloody hand that is, convicted of murder or has committed a murder, and then still uses that bloody hand to cover someone's mouth to stop further information from coming out. So if you think about it, it's a pretty intense, pretty poignant, you know, um, statement, is that the bloody hand of someone who's killed is still trying to cover up any voices from getting out. So it's pretty intense in my
Yeah,
view.
it is. Do you think that there are stereotypes that perpetuate this violence against Native people in the United States?
I think so. Yeah, I do. I think so. Because if you look at Native stereotypes, what does it do? Any kind of stereotype for any race, in my view, reduces the humanity of that race. If you make someone a cartoon, it takes
Yep.
away their humanity. It takes away what this person really is. You don't. If you see a cartoon that's making fun of someone, let's say, for example, the Cleveland Indians Chief Wahoo, the most horrendous caricature of a Native person ever. And if you look at that guy, you don't think of that weird cartoon character as having a wife and kids or grandchildren. you don't think of them as having a job or working hard to take care of their family. You see a cartoon, you don't see the humanity in that person. So unfortunately, there's going to be some people who see these stereotypes, take that to heart, don't look at someone as a person, and therefore what's the big deal in killing someone who's just a cartoon?
Yep.
So I think it does tremendous damage, horrible damage, and it certainly dismantles culture.
Yeah, so in thinking about those stereotypes, there's this new show about missing, murdered, and Indigenous awareness called the Alaska Daily.
What's the story?
Cold case in Mead, a dead woman named Gloria Nunmuck.
Now they're missing and murdered. Why?
Why?
Yeah, even if we figure out what happened, no one's gonna do anything about it. Not the cops, not the courts, not the politicians.
Then we report on that.
You mean that? You'll take it all away.
I do. Her death is obviously part of a pattern. We need to prove it, and we need to show who's to blame.
Great. So why not just give the whole story to me?
For starters, it's my story.
Do you know anything about Alaska?
That's why it's called investigative reporting.
Is that why you're here, to teach us about reporting?
She always like this?
Yes. Roz, you wanted the State House, you got State House.
That's before I knew that doing this story right was an option.
Fine, but Eileen is here now, and I want you both on it together. Okay?
Would you say, in your opinion, this show is bringing awareness, or would you say it's glamorizing the trauma of real Native families?
I definitely think it's bringing some awareness, and I wouldn't say it's so much glamorizing the trauma of missing and murdered Indigenous women. I interviewed Grace Dove, who is the Indigenous actress on the show, who plays alongside Hilary Swank, who is the character that's like this tough, New York journalist who flies into the Alaska Daily and, shows everybody how to do it right. So, I was teasing with Grace Dove during the interview. I said, are you going to say white savior at any point? We kind of chuckled about it. So, I understand what ABC's doing in the sense that, they're bringing a well-known actor into this show. Hilary Swank's definitely a well-known actor, and but she is kind of showing everybody how to do things. So the one thing that I felt was good about the show is that they bring Grace Dove, who plays Roz, in as a collaborator. They're working together. So there's certain things that Roz can do in the community that Hillary would not be able to do, or Eileen, rather, I should say. And it tends to work together because Roz is able to speak with a mother of a woman who is missing / murdered. And so I feel as though ABC's doing the best they can, by introducing a new actor to this series anyways, meaning Grace Dove. But one thing that I did appreciate that I see ABC do is that they created a website on their site, abc.com/MMIW, where they talk about missing and murdered Indigenous women. And they also have the red handprint on the screen and statistics about missing and murdered Indigenous women. So that's nice to see. Is it perfect? I don't think it's perfect, but I think they're doing the best they can.
Yeah, and do they actually talk about white saviorism at all? I know you joked about it, but do they explicitly say it?
I wonder if it's coming. It might, because I will say that Grace Dove's character Roz is kind of in your face, like, well, don't tell me what to do. You don't understand this town like I do. Eileen, and so there are some intense moments, and Roz isn't a shrinking violet, which is good to see.
Yeah. And do you think there is a connection between the colonization of the United States and the silencing or the lack of awareness of missing, murdered, and Indigenous women?
Yes, absolutely. In my view, and these are my words, but colonization is like a terribly misinformed teacher that keeps trying to teach from the wrong history book. And when we are taught in history that Native people are just worthless savages, I mean, look at the Declaration of Independence. How am I referred to in the Declaration of Independence? I'm a merciless Indian savage. It says it in the Declaration of Independence, merciless Indian savages. So who can be surprised when some of our children listen to what's being taught? I think to answer your question, yes.
I think for me, what's coming up right now is around, I know Black transgender women. They are oftentimes silenced and their murders are completely disregarded. Do you see the same thing, or is there any data out there around Indigenous trans women?
Yes. I sadly, I don't have the statistics in front of me, but I have, researched this quite a bit. I don't know the exact numbers and things, but it's a lot, and it's troubling, and it's sad, and as far as I'm concerned, a woman, a trans woman is a woman to me. I don't discriminate on that. If you are a woman, you are a woman, as far as I'm concerned, and when I say missing and murdered Indigenous women, I include trans women in there, and they are just as targeted, if not more. I know of some family members that we spoke to, my family, and have discovered quite a few that were, terribly targeted and murdered, kidnapped. There's a family member who we talked to whose family was, literally cut into pieces, and they didn't get the whole body back. It's just terrible. One of the most upsetting things that happened, my wife and I were talking about this, and there's a man an Indigenous man whose daughter was kidnapped and killed, and the perpetrator accidentally put her into a recycling bin, which did not get thrown away right away.
Wow.
Sounds horrifying, right?
Yeah.
The father said, "I am so grateful that he put her into the recycling bin so that we were able to recover her body. If he would have put her in the other one, we wouldn't have." And I was like, in what world does someone's daughter being put into a recycling bin a place to be grateful?
Yep.
But that's what he said, and it affected me so deeply. And this is the types of things that are happening. It's awful.
Yeah. It's like you're choosing between the greater evil of which one would you rather have.
That's exactly right. Yeah. To choose between the greater evil is a terrible place to be. I'm just like, and I my heart for this family, and I really do think about this every day. Can you imagine, and I don't even want to do this at all, but can you imagine one of your closest loved ones, you go home and they're gone, and you never know what happens to them for the rest of your life? Never know.
Yep.
I can't even fathom that. But there's families who deal with this every day.
What are some things that we could do to hold systems accountable to find women and to stop this type of violence?
Advocate the importance of using social media. It's a lot more powerful than people realize. Using the hashtag MMIW, or copying your local legislators on certain topics that you feel important about. There's a district attorney, attorney Trent Shores, who worked diligently, the past few years to try and increase exposure or ways for agencies that share information to literally look up on these kiosks that they would bring to tribal nations and say, look, if you're looking for a woman or if you're looking for a perpetrator, we're going to compile all the information in one place. And, Trent Shores really worked to have this done. And I know that they're still continuing to work on these things, but I think collaboration between organizations is key. Social media is key. And, some of these grassroots efforts don't ever undermine how powerful they can be. I think these are the ways that we really can, feel empowered and do things that that we feel as though are going to make a difference, because they do, no matter
Yeah.
how small.
I think we oftentimes underestimate the micro level change and how that feeds into the macro.
Yes.
And speaking of micro, macro, in our everyday lives, how can we like squash those microaggressions, micro insults against the Native community?
If we see it happen, Indigenous people, or people of color, or people who are getting attacked, don't always have to face it alone, folks.
Yep.
You put your energy out there and say, I'm sorry what happened to your people. I hear this all the time, and I don't need that. What happened in the past. You didn't do it. But I sure wouldn't mind people coming in here and there and saying, hey, knock it off. Leave this dude alone. I'm not saying that it's going to solve it, but it's nice to know that occasionally someone's on my side. It
Yep.
feels good. And if at least you can offer something like, hey, I'm on your side here and there, at least they're not completely getting bamboozled or squashed by a bunch of people who are out to get them. It's nice to know that, hey, you know what, maybe there's some sides against me, but there's also some voices for me too.
And that's the thing about microaggressions is that you don't oftentimes know that you're being microaggressed until like later you're like,
Right.
wait, did that person just say that to me? Am I
Right.
feeling those feelings correctly? And because we're so used to like oppressing the feelings that we have, we typically don't say anything if it's happening because we're not aware that
Exactly.
it's happening. And so to have those other people step up for us, I think
Yeah.
that's a very big thing to put on
Yeah.
the, you know,
Or turning your head from the left to the right in the middle of the night on your pillow and going, hey, wait a minute.
right? Like, let me think back to that
Did he
conversation.
say? Been there. Been there
Yes.
too much. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there anything, Vincent, that I haven't asked you that you would love our viewers to know?
I think you asked some really great questions, and I really appreciate it. I think that I think a great thing people can do is literally type in the hashtag MMIW on social media and check out some of the things you see, or check out some of the missing posters, or check out some of make it real for yourself. I think it was Nietzsche that said it is good to think upon those things that sometimes evade us. And I'm not saying that correctly, but things you don't often think about, it's nice to kind of look into.
Yeah, and my mind keeps going back to the research that is available, the data. As a journalist, what are some things that we can do in terms of like finding sources that are credible? Where should we be looking?
Well, I think that there's a great report that I can share with you from a colleague of mine, Lisa Elwood, who wrote a story on MMIW on both sides of the Turtle Island. As an excellent report. I've done quite a bit of research and reporting on MMW myself. I've met with leaders in Washington D.C. And watched quite a bit of legislation go through. Thankfully.
Well,
So.
thank you, Vincent. This has been a very enlightening conversation, and I know you have so much more to share. So, how can we stay in touch or follow you in your work?
Oh, well, I have a little slide here. I can click. So I'm on social media at Vince Schilling. And I worked hard to make sure everything said Vince Schilling. Boy, I had to work.
That's definitely hard.
But I'm very active on Twitter at Vince Schilling, and TikTok's been doing well. Boy, you know what? I tell you, I'm watching the world of TikTok just blow up, and I strongly advocate for anyone who has a voice out there. It's a heck of a platform. So they're all these platforms are good platforms for social media. So
You may just be
they can reach
convincing
out to me
me.
on Vince Schilling.
I'm jealous. I could not get my name without an underscore or a period. So I'm gonna have to do a better job. Maybe I should
Yeah, I
download
got very
TikTok.
lucky. I got very lucky.
Well, thank you so much, Vincent. We have run out of time. And so I just want to thank you again for having this conversation with us. You can watch past episodes anytime on watch.ripbs.org, and be sure to follow us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates. Thank you.